The massive Catherian fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark ghosts materializing from empty space. Their black ships stretched for miles, each one a monument to 1,000 years of conquest across the galaxy. Admiral Vextar stood tall on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion, watching the small blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen. "Look at it," he said to his tactical officer, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile, so small, so defenseless. "These humans probably still think they're alone in the universe." The tactical officer nodded eagerly. "Our scouts reported they barely have space travel, Admiral. This will be our easiest conquest yet." Vextar had conquered 47 worlds in his lifetime. Each one had fallen within days, sometimes hours. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force. Demand surrender, crush any resistance, and move on to the next target. Earth would be no different. But as the fleet moved deeper into the system, something felt wrong. The scanner readings showed structures that shouldn't exist. Massive rings circled every planet, even the small rocky ones. The asteroid belt buzzed, with activity from what looked like enormous space stations. Energy readings spiked across the spectrum, showing technology that was centuries ahead of what Earth should possess. "Sir," the tactical officer said, his voice uncertain for the first time. "The readings. They don't match our intelligence reports." Vextar frowned. "Run the scans again. There must be some mistake." Meanwhile, deep beneath the city of Seoul, Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun sat in a command center that had been carved from solid rock decades ago. The walls were lined with screens showing every approach to Earth, every ship in the Catherian fleet, every weapon system they carried. Around him, officers from every nation on Earth worked together with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Hyun was young for such a position, only 35, but he had been training for this moment his entire life. His father had trained before him, and his grandfather before that. For 3 generations, the Park family had prepared for this day, passing down secrets that could not be written in any book or stored in any computer. "Signal coming in from the alien fleet, sir," reported Captain Kim Sora from her station. She was one of the best communication officers Earth had ever produced, able to speak 17 different languages and decode transmission patterns that would baffle most experts. "Put it on the main screen," Hyun said, adjusting his uniform. His hands were steady, his voice calm. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind thousands of times. The alien commander's face filled the screen. His skin was scaled and green, his eyes yellow with vertical pupils like a snake. When he spoke, his voice was deep and filled with the arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. "Primitive humans," Vextar said, "you will surrender your world immediately or face complete annihilation. You have 1 hour to consider your response." Haeon looked at the alien commander for a long moment, then allowed himself a small smile. "Welcome to our solar system, Admiral. We've been waiting for you." The alien's expression changed instantly. The arrogance melted away, replaced by confusion and something that might have been fear. "Waiting? What do you mean waiting?" Sif. In answer to his question, the space around the Catherian fleet suddenly came alive. Defense platforms that had been hidden throughout the system powered up one by one. Weapons that had been disguised as asteroids revealed themselves. Space stations that had been running silent began broadcasting targeting signals. Within seconds, every ship in the alien fleet found itself locked in the crosshairs of dozens of weapon systems. The Catherian sensors screamed warnings as energy readings spiked beyond anything they had ever encountered. "Impossible," Vextar whispered, his yellow eyes wide with shock. "How did you build all of this? Our intelligence reports said you were barely capable of reaching your own moon." "Your intelligence was meant to find exactly what we wanted it to find," Hyun replied calmly. "We've known about your empire for centuries. We've been tracking your expansion across the galaxy, studying your tactics, learning your weaknesses." Alien Admiral's hands moved frantically over his controls. "This is impossible. We've been traveling for 1,000 years to reach this system. How could you possibly have known we were coming?" "Because we found one of your scout ships 300 years ago," Hyun said. "It crashed on our world in 1823. We reverse-engineered your technology, learned your language, and discovered your expansion patterns. We've had nearly 1,000 years to prepare for this moment. Vextar's face went pale beneath his green scales. 1,000 years? But that would mean... ... That would mean we've been preparing for this war longer than you've been fighting it, Heen finished. Every move you've made, every world you've conquered, every tactical decision your empire has implemented, we've been watching, learning, and preparing. The alien fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by weapons they couldn't see coming, and outnumbered by an enemy they had thought was primitive. For the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, Admiral Vextar found himself completely outmatched. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "To talk," Hune replied. "We have a lot to discuss." 3 days after the standoff in space, Admiral Vextar found himself sitting in a room that should not have existed. The diplomatic chamber was located on a space station at L5, a point between Earth and its moon where gravity from both bodies balanced perfectly. The room itself was impossible by Catharian standards. Artificial gravity kept everyone comfortably seated. Energy shields shimmered around the walls. And translation devices worked so perfectly that every word was understood instantly. Vextar had been building ships and conquering worlds for over 200 years, but he had never seen technology this advanced. The humans sat across from him at a simple table, looking calm and confident. Their leader, Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun, had chosen 3 specialists to join the meeting. Dr. Lee Min-ho was a thin man, with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore simple clothes and looked more like a teacher than a military officer. But when he placed a small piece of metal on the table, Vextar felt his blood run cold. "We found this in the ice fields of Siberia 300 years ago," Lee said quietly. "It's made from Catharian alloy." "Oh." "The metal came from one of your scout ships that crashed on our world in 1823. Vextar stared at the fragment. He could see the distinctive patterns in the metal, the way it had been forged in the great factories of his home world. There was no mistaking it. "But how could it be here?" "It's impossible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our first scouts didn't reach this part of the galaxy until much later. We didn't even know this system existed in 1823. "Actually, you did," said Commander Jungnari, a woman with sharp eyes and a confident smile. "Your scouts reached this sector in 1820. We've been tracking your empire's expansion for centuries, Admiral. Every world you've conquered, every ship you've built, every new weapon you've developed, we've been watching all of it." Vextar felt his carefully controlled composure begin to crack.
"Oh, you're lying."
"Your species barely had steam engines when our probe arrived. You were burning coal and riding horses. How could you possibly track an interstellar empire?" Lee Min-ho touched a control on the table, and suddenly the room filled with light. A 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared above them, showing thousands of star systems in perfect detail. Red dots marked every world the Catharian Empire controlled, but Vextar's eyes were drawn to something else. Blue lines connected the red dots, forming a vast web that stretched across light years of space. "While you spent 1,000 years traveling at near light speed," Nari explained, "we spent those same 1,000 years building something better, faster than light communication networks. Every world you conquered had already been in contact with Earth for generations before you arrived." Vextar studied the map, his mind racing. The blue lines didn't just connect to the red dots, extended far beyond Catharian space, reaching into regions of the galaxy his empire had never explored. What are those other connections? Shin Wu, a quiet man who had been silent until now, stepped forward with a data pad in his hands. "Those are our allies, Admiral. Your empire has been walking into a carefully planned trap for the past 5 centuries. Those easy victories you celebrated, we made them easy."
"What do you mean?"
Vextar asked, though he was beginning to fear the answer. "Every world you conquered was prepared for your arrival," Shin explained. "We evacuated the real defenders. The important technology, the valuable resources, we left behind expendable assets and made sure your victories looked convincing." Vextar's mind flashed back to his recent conquests. The Zeranian mining guild had fallen in just 3 days. The Helios Republic had surrendered after a single battle. The Centauri colonies had barely put up a fight. At the time, he had been proud of his tactical brilliance. Now he realized the truth. The Zeranian Mining Guild, he said slowly. Their defense fleet was so small, and the Helios Republic's weapons were outdated by centuries. Because we wanted them to be, Nari said, quietly. While you were busy conquering empty shells, we were building alliances with the real powers in this galaxy. The civilizations you never even knew existed. The holographic map changed, showing new connections that extended far beyond anything Vexstar had imagined. Entire regions of space that his empire had marked as unexplored were actually home to advanced civilizations. All of them were connected by the blue lines. All of them were part of Earth's network. How long? Vexstar asked. Long have you been planning this? Since the day we found that first piece of metal in the ice, Lee replied. We knew that someday your empire would reach Earth. We knew we had to be ready. Vexstar slumped in. His chair, the weight of the revelation crushing down on him. His mighty empire, built over 1,000 years of conquest, had been nothing more than a puppet dancing to Earth's strings. Every victory had been hollow, every conquest had been permitted. Every strategic decision had been anticipated and countered. What happens now? He asked. Park Hyun leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. Now, Admiral, we give you a choice. Your empire's finished, but your people don't have to be. We're prepared to offer something your empire never gave to others. And what's that? A chance to join us instead of being conquered by us. The emergency meeting aboard the Dominion felt like a funeral. Admiral Vexstar sat at the head of the War Council table, staring at the tactical display that showed his empire falling apart in real time. The screen flickered with red warning lights as more and more ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. These weren't human vessels. They were designs he had never seen before. A sleek and powerful craft that moved with the confidence of advanced civilizations. Sir, his young aide whispered, leaning close to avoid being overheard by the other officers. We're receiving messages from the Proxima Collective. They're demanding our immediate surrender. Vexstar's scaled hand tightened into a fist. The Proxima Collective was supposed to be one of his empire's most secure holdings. They had conquered it only 50 years ago, and the local population had seemed completely broken. What are they saying? They claim that human operatives have been arming the slave populations for decades, sir. The entire system is in revolt. Before Vexstar could respond, more reports began flooding in. His communication officers were struggling to keep up with the incoming messages. Every few seconds, another world declared independence, another fleet defected, another crucial installation fell to mysterious saboteurs. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Yoon-jae sat in a command center buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. The room was small and cramped, filled with the soft hum of quantum communication arrays that could send messages across the galaxy in seconds. Maps covered every wall, showing star systems and trade routes that most humans had never heard of. Yoon-jae was a quiet man in his 40s, with graying hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 20 years of his life coordinating the most complex intelligence operation in galactic history. Today, all of that work was finally paying off. Agent Moonbeam reports complete success on Kepler 440b, announced Sergeant Kim Tae from his desk. The local population has taken control of all orbital defense platforms. Catherian ground forces are requesting terms of surrender. Agent Starfish confirms sabotage mission accomplished at the Vega shipyards, added Lieutenant Park Soo. Entire Catherian reinforcement fleet is dead in the water. Their engines won't restart for weeks. Yoon-jae nodded grimly. Each of these reports represented years of careful planning and incredible personal risk. Agent Moonbeam had been working undercover on Kepler 440b for 15 years, slowly building trust with the local resistance. Agent Starfish had spent a decade working as a maintenance engineer at the Vega shipyards, waiting for this moment. Signal all cells, Yoon-jae ordered. Execute Order Sunrise. The order went out across the galaxy in seconds, carried by quantum communication networks that the Catherians had never even detected. On dozens of worlds, human agents who had been living double lives for decades finally revealed their true purpose. Weapons caches that had been hidden for years were suddenly distributed to local populations. Computer viruses that had been lying dormant in Catherian systems activated all at once, back on the Dominion. Vexstar watched his empire crumble with each passing minute. Rebellion erupted on world after world with surgical precision. His officers were struggling to process the flood of bad news coming in from every corner of Catherian space. "This is impossible," he said to his tactical officer. "How could they coordinate all of this? How did they infiltrate so deeply into our empire?" The tactical officer, a veteran named Curtin, shook his head in disbelief. "Sir, we're receiving reports of sabotage from our most secure installations. Even our intelligence headquarters on Altair has been compromised. Somehow they knew everything about our operations." Vexstar was about to respond when something unexpected happened. His own communications officer, a Catherian named Zekti, who had served faithfully for over a decade, suddenly stood up from his station. Admiral Zaktai said in a voice that was suddenly different, "I believe I can answer your question." Vexti reached behind his ear and removed a small device that looked like a standard Catherian neural implant. But as he held it up to the light, everyone could see that it was something else entirely. The device was clearly human technology, far more advanced than anything the Catherians had developed. As Zaktai removed the device, its appearance began to change slightly. His scales became less prominent, his eyes shifted color, and his facial structure altered in subtle ways. He had been wearing a sophisticated disguise for years, and none of them had ever noticed. "Agent Nightfall reporting for duty, sir," he said, now speaking in perfect human standard language. "The Catherian Empire has been compromised for the past 200 years. The silence in the room was deafening. Vexstar stared at the communications officer who had served beside him for over a decade, who had shared meals with him, who had saved his life in 3 different battles. "You're human," Vexstar said quietly. "Half human, actually," Zaktai replied. "My mother was Catherian. My father was a human intelligence operative. I've been reporting on your empire's activities since I was recruited 20 years ago." Vexstar looked around the room at his other officers, sudden paranoia filling his mind. "How many others?" "Enough," Zektai said simply. "Your empire never conquered the galaxy, Admiral. It was conquered by us. It's a battle that everyone expected never happened." Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of the Dominion, watching his tactical screens with growing horror as the truth became clear. The Catherian fleet was completely surrounded, not just by human ships, but by vessels from civilizations he had never even heard of. Sleek silver ships with the markings of the Centauri. Alliance hung in space like deadly flowers. The massive, dark hulls of the Andromedan Collective formed a wall of metal that stretched for thousands of miles. Dozens of other ship designs filled the space around them, some crystal-like and beautiful, others angular and threatening, all of them clearly advanced beyond anything the Catherians possessed. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're counting over 3,000 enemy vessels. They have us outnumbered 15 to 1. Vexstar said nothing. Numbers were meaningless now. Even if they had been evenly matched, the Catherian fleet was falling apart from within. Ship after ship was powering down its weapons and broadcasting surrender codes. His own captains were abandoning him, choosing survival over loyalty to an empire that no longer existed. In the command center beneath Seoul, Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun watched the alien formation break apart like a house of cards. The screens around him showed Catherian ships going dark one by one as their crews gave up. The 1,000-year expansion that had terrorized the galaxy was ending not with a great battle, but with a whimper. "Sir," reported Commander Song Hannah from her station, "we're receiving messages from 17 former Catherian worlds. There. All requesting immediate membership in the Galactic Cooperative." Hyun nodded calmly, though inside he felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The Galactic Cooperative was Earth's greatest secret, a project that had taken 8 centuries to build. While the Catherians had been conquering worlds, humanity had been quietly building a shadow government for the galaxy, preparing for the day when the old order would finally fall. Dr. Choi Mina approached with a datapad in her hands and a satisfied smile on her face. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, one of the brightest strategic minds Earth had ever produced. "The Catherian command structure is in complete chaos," she reported. "Their supply lines have been cut. Their communication networks are compromised. Their military leaders are requesting asylum. Any significant resistance? Heian asked. Very little, Mina replied. Most of their fleet commanders are choosing cooperation over death. The few ships that are still fighting are being dealt with by their own crews. It seems that even the Catherians are tired of their empire. The irony was not lost on Heian. The Catherians had built their empire through fear and oppression, never realizing that this would make their own people eager to abandon them when a better option appeared, the moment Earth offered an alternative. The empire had collapsed from within. On the main view screen, Admiral Vextar's face appeared. The proud, arrogant commander, who had arrived just 3 days ago, was gone. In his place was a tired, defeated alien who looked much older than his years. His scaled skin had lost its luster, and his yellow eyes showed the weight of complete failure. "Commander Park," Vextar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "On behalf of what remains of the Catherian Imperial Navy, I formally request terms of surrender." Hyun looked at the alien leader with something approaching sympathy. Vextar had been a tool of his empire's ambitions, but he was not necessarily evil. Like many soldiers throughout history, he had simply been following orders and doing what he thought was right. Admiral Heen replied with professional courtesy, "You'll be pleased to know that the Galactic Cooperative has no interest in conquest or revenge. We're prepared to offer full membership to any Catherian worlds that choose to join us." For the first time in days, Vextar's eyes showed a flicker of hope, and those who refuse will be left alone, provided they commit to peaceful coexistence, Hyun said. Expression became slightly harder. "The Empire or threatened member worlds will be met with the full force of our alliance." Vextar nodded slowly. "I understand. What about my crews?" "Many of them are just soldiers following orders. They will be offered the same choice as everyone else," Hyun said. "Join us, return to their homeworlds, or find somewhere else to live peacefully. We're not interested in punishment, Admiral. We're interested in building something better." The alien commander was quiet for a long moment. "How long?" he finally asked. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since 1823, Hyun replied. "The day we found your first scout ship in the ice." Vextar closed his eyes. "Nearly 1,000 years. You've been preparing for this moment for nearly 1,000 years. "Yes," Heian said simply. "We learned early that the galaxy was a dangerous place. We decided to make it safer." Around them, the last of the Catherian fleet powered down their weapons. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the Catherian Empire fell, and the galaxy was a very different place. Ambassador Legina stood at the podium in the Great Hall of Unity Station, looking out at a sight that would have been impossible just 1 year ago. The vast chamber was filled with representatives from over 300 worlds, creatures of every shape and size, sitting together in peace. There were the tall, elegant beings from the Centauri Alliance with their blue skin and silver hair. The rock-like creatures from the Andromedon Collective sat in specially reinforced chairs. Small, furry beings from the Outer Rim worlds chattered excitedly with their translators. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now working together, sharing knowledge and resources under Earth's careful guidance. "The old age of conquest is over," Legina announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chambers. Advanced sound system. "Today, we begin the age of cooperation." The applause was thunderous, coming from beings who had vocal cords, and clicking sounds from those who communicated differently. It was a sound of hope that echoed through the station. And across the galaxy, in the audience, former Admiral Vextar sat with the Catherian delegation. He wore simple, civilian clothes now, no longer the proud military uniform of his empire. His people were junior partners in this new galactic civilization, a far cry from the masters they had once imagined themselves to be. The irony was not lost on him in trying to conquer Earth. The Catherians had actually freed the galaxy from their own tyranny. Vextar watched the human ambassador with a mixture of respect and amazement. These beings who had once seemed so primitive had orchestrated the most complex military and political operation in galactic history. They had played a game so long and so carefully that no one else had even realized it was being played. Legina continued her speech outlining the principles of the new galactic cooperative: free trade between worlds, shared scientific research, protection for weaker civilizations, and most importantly, an end to the conquest and slavery that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Meanwhile, back on Earth, deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, curator Han Bael was completing the final chapter of the most secret history in human civilization. The underground archives stretched for miles, filled with documents, artifacts, and records that told the true story of humanity's thousand-year preparation for this moment. Han Bael sealed the final report on Operation Long Game in a special container that would preserve it for centuries. The document was thick, containing detailed accounts of every phase of the operation: the recruitment and training of deep cover agents, the development of faster-than-light communication technology, the careful manipulation of galactic politics to weaken the Catherian Empire from within. As she walked through the corridors lined with the artifacts of Earth's secret history, she paused at a simple metal plaque mounted on the wall. The words were carved in both Korean and English, and they had guided humanity's strategy for nearly a millennium in the game of civilizations. Patience is the ultimate weapon. The plaque was dated 1823, the year that had changed everything. Below the date was a name: Kim Do-yeon, the young Korean astronomer who had first detected the strange signals from the crashed Catherian probe in the Siberian ice. First to understand that Earth was not alone, and that someday the galaxy would come calling. Kim Do-yeon had died in 1891, never knowing that his discovery would lead to the salvation of the galaxy. But his legacy lived on in every human agent who had risked their life on distant worlds, in every scientist who had worked to decode alien technology, in every leader who had made the hard choices necessary to protect not just Earth, but all free civilizations. Han Bael touched the plaque gently. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory of a man who had died over a century before she was born. Above her, on the surface of the Earth, the skies were filled with ships from hundreds of worlds. They traveled freely through jump gates built with Earth technology, carrying trade goods, scientific data, cultural exchanges between civilizations that had never known peace before. Former enemies now worked together to explore the unknown regions of space. The Catherians shared their knowledge of stellar engineering with the Centauri Alliance. The Andromedon Collective taught younger civilizations about sustainable resource management. Even the smallest worlds had something valuable to contribute. To the growing galactic community, the dream of galactic peace had become reality, but it had not happened by accident. It was the result of nearly 1,000 years of careful planning, patient preparation, an incredible sacrifice by thousands of humans who had worked in secret to make it possible. The aliens had played the long game for 1,000 years, conquering world after world in their slow march across the galaxy. But Earth had played an even longer game, one that began the moment humans realized they were not alone in the universe. In the end, patience had proven to be the ultimate weapon. The Catherians had been quick to conquer, but slow to understand. Humanity had been slow to act, but quick to learn. In the vast game of civilizations, the player who thinks furthest ahead is the one who wins.